My name is Scott McLeod. I work for the Nautel customer service team, and we're going to demonstrate today the VR Link remote control, which is used in the Vector Series NDB transmitters. Now, currently I have a VR Link connected directly to my computer. So this is the rear of the VR Link, and I have AC connected to it here. And I have the LAN connection directly from the VR Link, the rear LAN port, which in most VR Links is going to be your output. So directly from this LAN port to the LAN port on my computer. Now, the default IP of the VR Link, we could log in through Internet Explorer, but what we're going to use is an IP setup tool, which is provided by NetBurner, which you can download and see the VR Link manual. It'll advise where you can download this tool. This IP setup tool, which when popped up allows any VR Link connected to your computer, it'll pop up with the IP address. So right now this is the VR Link I have connected directly to the IP on my transmitter. The IP address is 192.168.254.2, which is the default settings from Nautel. So now we are going to just log in using a web browser to the VR Link. Now, because I've got it connected directly to my computer, what I have to do is set up my computer on the same subnet. So I got to change my adapter settings. Go to my LAN card, change the TCP4 properties to the same subnet. So I'm going to go to 192.168.254.3. It's not the same IP as the VR Link, but it's on the same subnet. And the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0, and that's good. Sometimes you may have to put in the default gateway, but I always try it without putting anything in at first. Once we close that, we should be able to try to launch the web page. Now I can open up a web browser and put in the IP address, or I can try to launch the web page from here. Popped up, and now we are into the VR Link. Now, if I go into the new device, this is where all the readings are shown in the VR Link, and we'll talk about this a bit later when we have it actually connected to a transmitter. Right now, the VR Link is not connected to a transmitter, so we are just into the remote control, but the remote control is not communicating with the transmitter, and we can see that by not in contact with the device. So before we connect it to a transmitter, we're going to log into the VR Link anyway, and the default username is root, and the password is Nautel, all lowercase. Hit submit, and now we're logged in. Before we connect to the transmitter, we're just going to go to site configuration. One of the options we have with the VR Link is we can have up to 3 extended control panels, ECMPs, and they show up as remote panels. Right now we can see we have no remote panels connected. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the remote panel, and I'll show you where on the back we connect the remote panel. Just for a sec, we'll go back to our PowerPoint presentation. Just one second. And here is where we connect the ECMP. It's 485 communication, so there's a serial bus plus, serial bus minus, and a serial bus ground. So we have that connected. I'm going to connect that, and we should see it pop up. So I'm just connecting it right now. I'm going to refresh my web browser, and we can see that the panel 1 popped up. Now, if I wanted to connect another extended control panel, I would just connect it to the ECMP B port, and then if I had a third, I'd connect to the ECMP C port. It is important to note that you should connect one at a time. If you connect multiple ones at the same time, you'll have a problem. So you have to connect one verify it pops up on the screen like this. Then you can connect another one, refresh the web page, and it'll say panel 2. So now that we're logged into the VR link and we know that it works, what we're going to do is we're going to set the IP to DHCP. So there's a couple ways we can do this, but the easiest way is to use the IP setup tool and make everything 0. And this sets the VR link to DHCP. So if I plug it into a network, the network will assign it an IP. If you have a static IP that you want to assign, you can just put in the static IP here, and it'll work the same. So once I get these all to 0, I simply hit set. And now my VR link is set to DHCP mode. So I've connected the VR link to my Vector 125 transmitter. There's the connection that goes to the transmitter. It's RS-232 out of the ECMP, the back of the ECMP, and that connects to J5 on the remote interface board of your Vector transmitter. I have AC connected. I've also connected left my ECMP connected, and I have the LAN connected to my ECMP, so it's connected to my internal network. It's been assigned an IP, and now we can go back in. So the IP address of the VR link now is 10.0.96.91, and that pulls up the VR link. The first thing we'll do is log in as the default root, and the password is NOTEL. And now we're logged in. Now what we'll do now is we'll just go through the different options we have with our VR link. So we'll go to user administration to start. Here we can create new users or delete new users because we are logged in as a super user with user administrative rights, equipment control, and site configuration. So to create one, we can just put in a name and a password. I'll use 1234, 1234, retype the password, and then we have to select what permissions we want. So we can create another user who can create and delete user accounts, or we can just have one that can control the equipment and configure it. So we'll do that. So now I have a test user, and you can create as many users as you want. The other things we can do as a super user in a site configuration is we can set up the site. You're always going to leave the primary device as the Vector. Some different applications you can use for different AM broadcast systems or FM systems, but for the VR link, we're always going to have it selected to Vector. The name you can type in just appears here, so you can name it whatever you want. I'm leaving it as VR link 2, but you can name it after your site. The remote panels references the ECMP3, the extended control panel, which can be part of the VR link. And we have one extended control panel. And we can set up the switches and lights on the ECMP to be whatever we want. Right now, they are all blank. So none of the switches on my ECMP that's plugged in will do anything. So we have to select what we want. So we'll do new device because that's our device. We'll have the first one set to RF power. Momentary is always a good one to have for a panel. So if it's set to off all the time, it won't leave your transmitter off. You can still go in the VR link and change it because it only toggles on a momentary switch and the value on. And you can set these switches to do any number of things. You can select the main side, momentary again, and we'll say main side, we'll say A. And once you've set the switches, You hit submit and it changes them. So now there is a default for the ECMP3, which includes RF power, time shutdown, main standby. But you can configure it to whatever you want. And that's how you do it. Now we'll go back into outputs. The ECMPs that are sold have 4 switches on it. So it's only really 4 that you can configure with switches. The rest would be control points. But we won't get into that part here. That's not many people use more than the switches that are on the ECMP. Now the outputs reference lights that are located on the ECMP. And once again, these lights are factory defaulted to a certain setting, but in our ECMP they've all been changed to blank. So we can change them, and these are just the lights on the ECMP. That of course we won't see in the slideshow because we were just going through the functions of the VR Link. But we'll set the first light to be RF power and on and pull down to assert. So the light should be on when we're RF on. So it is important to know that you can configure the ECMP3 or 2 to the inputs and outputs to whatever you want. They are user determined. Also in this we have an email server. So setting up this email server allows us to send an email out when you select. So when we go into the equipment, I'll show you where you can say set it up so that it sends an email. And it sends an email with all the current readings of the system. It's not an automated thing. You have to go in and select it to send an email. And for it to do that, the ECMP must be on a mail server so that it has a place to send it from. You don't need the mail server active for the system to work. You can still do print screens and email those to yourself, but this is just one way you can do it. That's why you set up the email server. The new device is where you can configure all the different pages of meter readings and status. I would suggest leaving this as factory default, and I'll go in and show you what it looks like. We'll get rid of the new device name, and we'll call it a VR125. Actually, VR250, I think we're terminated into, so VR250. It's a low power beacon. It's just capable of a little more power. Submit, and you can see the equipment now is no longer new device. It's VR250. So let's go into the equipment. Here's where we get all the meter readings and can control the transmitter. Right now, we can see that the system is in remote mode. If the system, the transmitter, is in local mode, we can't control it here. We can just get meter readings. But since we're in remote, we can turn on. And we'll let the web page refresh and see what power level we come up to. So it looks like it's set at a pretty low power. It's just coming up. I'll let it update. So we're about 125 watts. We'll just see if it's going to come up any more. You can set the auto refresh in the VR Link, or you can just press F5 and it'll refresh your web page. So we can decrease power from here. So you can see the total power is dropping. Or we can increase it. We are active on side A now. This transmitter doesn't have a operating side B, so I can't actually change it over. So we'll leave it on side A. But we can change the controls from the monitor mode is set to normal. We can change it to bypass, which will allow us to make adjustments on the transmitter without it automatic shutting down. DC supply is disabled because it doesn't have a DC supply. And the keyer and modulation is on, so we're broadcasting some ident. Now, if we had an ATU connected up serially, which you can see the status. So right now, we can see the ATU system is in local or auto-tuned. So we are connected serially to a ATU right now. And you can see whether it needs to be tuned or not tuned. Standby side test, if we had a standby transmitter, allows you to run tests, and basically it does a low voltage look on your standby side. So if you're a dual transmitter, it will test the non-active side. We can see all the meter readings, forward power, reflected power, right here. Monitor points and control points are once again site configured, and we're not going to get into setting them up in this demonstration. Alarms, right now we have no active faults. If we did, we could try resetting them. There's also a hardware reset, which is more of a, it's almost like a AC cycle. It reboots the whole system. In the save feature, here's where we can send an email. So if you click here, it saves all the current meter readings to a disk, and then we can send an email if we have the email server set up in the site configuration. Unfortunately, Nautel does not have an email server that I can set up to operate like this right now. About this equipment, just shows the transmitter and the software that is installed on the transmitter and all the calibration data. So the VR Link is a very useful tool to remotely control and monitor the NDB system. It does have some limitations. You can't compute thresholds for the monitor mode here. You have to do that locally, but you can enable them or change it to bypass here. And we can see all the meter readings. So it's a very useful tool. The biggest questions are, how do you connect to it? So you need to know the IP, which we looked at earlier, and how do I use my ECMP, my extended control panel? And we connect it serially to the 485 connection of the VR Link, and then we configure it in remote panels. And it will be configured from the factory as a standard, but you can always change it, the inputs and outputs. And that's how we use the VR Link. If you have more questions on the VR Link or would like to see other videos shown by Nautel, please email your suggestions to support@nautel.com. Thank you.